Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours, the show where I take your questions from PollGab, the URL up on the screen there. Take your highly voted questions from PollGab and then go talk through them about the Microsoft Data Platform, SQL Server, Azure SQL whatever. Back in the home office, and today they are pouring concrete in my backyard. We have a backyard renovation that we signed a contract on almost a year ago today, and they've been gradually working through it. The world's slowest construction company. I have nothing but terrible things to say about them if you've followed my Instagram or TikTok. But they're actually pouring concrete in the backyard today, pouring in the new patio, new areas of the patio. We have a multi-level thing going on there, so I can't wait to see what kind of progress they make today. Having concrete out there finally makes it feel like it's legit. So we have over in the chat, we have Surgeon from the Netherlands, SQL Suck, CTI Geek, a few of our regular folks, Jim Van Allen. Default Blame Acceptor says, are there photos? There's not yet. I wanted to wait until, if you go to my Instagram or TikTok, there are photos of it out there, but not of the concrete pouring yet. I wanted to let them get a little bit of progress first before I take pictures. CTI Geek says, is the TikTok name the same? It's probably Brent Ozar. I never remember if it's Brent Ozar or Brento. Some platforms, if I get in early enough, I'm just Brento, but otherwise it's Brent Ozar. Surly Dev, good afternoon. Good to see you from over in the UK. So we'll be, like, literally the instant that this office hours is over, I'm going to go right back out there and just be like, hey, what's going on? So let's see here. The top voted question is from, let's see, Fabricator. I see what you did there. Who says, hi, Brent, what's your take on the recent launch of Microsoft Fabric as one product that can handle all your analytical needs? So here's the thing. Every 3 years, Microsoft brings out a brand new analytics product. And every 3 years, when they say it's brand new, if you look under the covers, it's all the same stuff, just rearranged in slightly different order. They're still trying to find the product mix that works well, and they'll like drop in one product, switch out another. They're just trying to get the right little mix there. If you have something that's working well, and the market loves it, you keep the name the same. If you're not doing well, if the product isn't selling well in the market and you're trying to come up with new ways, you'll be like, hey, check out brand new product A. Anybody? Anybody? Okay, all right. How about check out brand new product B? Anybody? And so that's what they're doing, is they keep changing the name and gradually changing little parts underneath of it, trying to find a mix that works. This time around, it's more focused on Power BI, but it's still a lot of the same tools underneath. Do I think it'll take off? I haven't seen them have any luck in the last 20 years with this strategy, so I'm not quite sure it'll take off again this time. Maybe this will be the name that actually makes it stick. Next up, GuaroSQL says, my company has a lot of replications that use CDC. When I run SP Blitz Index, it tells me to create indexes on the CDC tables. Should I? My question usually when people want to start, and you can tune the CDC tables if you want to. My question with those is usually, hey, let's talk about how often you're polling for changes. If you're hitting these tables so hard that your CDC tables are coming to the top of the list on the tables that desperately need the most attention, I usually want to go, all right, why are we polling the CDC changes, polling for CDC changes every 30 seconds, for example? True story, I had a client that was actually trying to do that. And if you want real-time reports, CDC or anything that tracks changes isn't really the right tool to get you there. You're going to be much better off on something like a read-only secondary, which can keep up to date much more quickly without constantly changing the structures. You can index the CDC tables. It's just the stopping point where I go, hold on, let's talk about our usage of CDC. Next up, we have G-Surgeon, who's here, who says, I recently started using SQL Constant Care. It recommended that I create a few indexes. Within 5 minutes after receiving the email, I looked at SP Blitz Index, and it didn't show those missing indexes. Why? Well, with SQL Constant Care, we can put more work in than SP Blitz Index does. We can look at the usage over time. We can look at the plan cache. We can slice and dice multiple index recommendations together because we have the processing time to do that up in the cloud, whereas SP Blitz Index, you kind of want the results to return right away. So SP Blitz Index just repeats the stuff that's directly in the missing index DMVs, whereas SQL Constant Care takes more time and does more in-depth analysis. That's why you'll see them as even deeper. Leonardo. Good morning, Leonardo. Next up, Maxim asks, hi Brent, how do you deal with periodic timeouts in a database, like they occur once a week on Saturday night between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m.? I get my lazy ass up and I look. Right? That's what the company pays you for. I know you think that the company pays you to sit around and look good, to be a nice hat rack, but newsflash, they want you to fix it. So when a bump happens every time, every Sunday between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., you set yourself, this may be new to you, something called an alarm. That's right. You have to wake up on a specific time. Now, I'm being kind of tough on you, and some of you will say, hey, Brent, couldn't he just schedule an extended event session? Sure, he could. He could schedule an event session ahead of time or set up a monitoring tool, but it's going to lead you to ask more questions, and the answers to those questions will be there for you while the event is happening, not later when your hungover rear end gradually rolls itself out of bed. Get up and go look. And the Frag King says, I am a nice hat rack, though. That's true. You just don't get paid. Although maybe some of us have OnlyFans. Maybe we do get paid to be a nice hat rack. So what do you do on Sunday at 4 a.m. when this kinds of timeout goes and happens? One thing that you can do is go look at extended events to set up sessions. I honestly wouldn't do that, though. I would just go look at SP who is active or log SP who is active to a table to see what was happening around those times. It's possible that you won't even be able to connect to the SQL server, in which case it's likely a thread pool issue. I talk about how to solve that in the Mastering Server Tuning class in the thread pool module. And there are a couple of poison weight modules in there where I talk about that as well. D. Sanchez says he likes the t-shirt. I like that too as well. I've had it for a few years. I love playing the original Grand Theft Auto, and these days I just watch other people play it on Twitch, especially Omar. Omar is an amazing Grand Theft Auto player, especially speed driving. End try, begin cry. Oh, okay, that's a pretty good name. I like it. End try, begin cry. Says, is there a way to have a catch block return multiple errors? So not natively. First, I'm going to give you the book answer. The book answer is as soon as you hit an error, you need to bail out immediately. Don't keep running your code, piling up one error after another, and then at the end go, here's this big flaming pile of errors. No, as soon as there's an error, you want to immediately bail out. Having said that, if you wanted to, like if it was a really long batch job and you didn't want to abort it while it was happening, or you want to let several errors happen and then go on to the end, what I would do is I would insert those errors into a table variable. Insert them into a table variable because then that way, during the rollback, table variable contents are still around because table variable contents aren't affected by rollbacks. Neat little trick that I first learned from Itzik Ben-Gan. If you ever have the chance to see one of Itzik Ben-Gan's sessions or read his articles or his books, it's just an absolute T-SQL wizard. I learned something every time I see him speak. Even if I see him give the same session multiple times in a row, I still learn something because the guy's just freaking brilliant. Next up, ConfusedDBA says, "Hi Brent, my friend has an odd way to declare dictionary statuses in a database. Instead of IDs 1, 2, 3, 4, he uses 100, 200, 300. His reason is he can add in between statuses later, like 150 or 175. Is this, or have I seen this before? Absolutely all the time. There are a couple things you want to know about it. One is that when you declare an identity column, you can set the seed and the incrementing value to be anything you want. It could start at 1 and go up by 1 every time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it doesn't have to. You could set it to 100 and to go up by 100 every time. That's part of when you declare a column or specify that a column is an identity. And you usually see people say identity parentheses 1 comma 1. Well, you could say 1 comma 100 or 100 comma 100. So that's one thing to know. Next thing to know is if you then wanted to go back and put in an in-between value, you can use the set identity insert on command so that you can override those values so that the default is 100, 200, 300, but then you can manually insert a value later. But here's a last piece of advice that I would give you as someone with a whole lot of gray hair who's been doing this for a really long time. The ID should be separate from the sort order. You want one column for ID, you want a separate column for sort order. And in sort order, that's where you put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, 200, 300, 400, alphabetical, whatever it is that you want. So that if ordering is important to you, like in a status, then that way you can change those numbers easily later. That status sort order should only be in a separate column in that one table, not propagated out to all the other child tables. So hopefully that helps. Next up, Slonik asks, what are your favorite extensions for Postgres? I don't have any. And so I always feel like a sham when I talk about Postgres because I really don't have to do anything. It just kind of works. I am a really big fan of just use the database exactly as it comes, at as few possible ways to break as you can. Don't inject extra things in order to make the database better or cooler, because generally speaking, it means it's going to make it less reliable, harder to support. Then I can tell you that firsthand because I tried to add an extension to Aurora Postgres and I proceeded to break the bejesus out of it temporarily. I'm like, I just want to track query performance statistics, and it was absolutely terrible. Frag King says Brent doesn't play favorites. That's not true, Frag King. You are my favorite. Cool. Tim asks, hi Brent, message 8623, level 16, state 1. Tim, is that how you start all your conversations? Do you just throw random numbers inside of there? He says, the query processor ran out of internal resources and couldn't produce a query plan. He says, do you talk about 8623 in your classes? No, I don't have to because it's totally self-obvious. Fix the query. Fix the query. Query's a hot mess. It's terrible. It's awful. It's ugly. It's probably thousands of lines long. Somebody tried to throw every table in and a cross join every which way but loose. Simplify your query. So I guess to some extent, I do talk about that inside my training classes in the sense of like fundamentals of query tuning, right? The very first fundamentals of query tuning class, I talk about how hard it is for SQL Server to build a query plan, how it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, and why it's so important to simplify the queries as much as you possibly can. Everybody's now just randomly throwing out error messages inside of chats and topics, so digression, true story. So I went to the Microsoft Certified Master School, like 10, 15 years ago. You go to this big thing at Microsoft's campus and then you spend like 3 weeks locked in a room having to learn all kinds of internal stuff about SQL Server. And there were people there who actually did have a bunch of error numbers memorized. And I'm like, I'm not ever going to be one of those people. I was really happy that for a long time I knew the CX Packet knowledge base article, and I've now forgotten that as well because I haven't taught mastering server tuning live in a while, so I haven't had to remember that KB article. Now I just tell people go to brentozar.com/go/CX Packet, and that handles that one. Junior DBA asks, in your view, what's the separation between a site reliability engineer and database reliability or database administrator work and responsibilities? In companies that have SREs, Alpha Cronus has an error message in there. In companies that have SREs, site reliability engineers, generally the site reliability engineers are the first people on call when something goes wrong with the site. See how that works? Site reliability engineers, site reliability. So when problems come from alerting tools, when someone calls in for help, whatever, the site reliability engineers start doing that triaging. And it's kind of like help desk for servers. And they know a lot about how different servers work, how different services work, and then they can escalate it to database administrators if necessary. By the nature of their work, site reliability engineers often know a lot about databases, but they're not necessarily the ones who set up and configure the database from scratch, the ones who do provisioning and security, whereas database administrators still mostly do that. C# Fritz says, hey, Brent, I'd love to connect with you at some point. Absolutely. Go to brentozar.com and click consulting up at the top. Click consulting up at the top, and then you can schedule a call with me, get diagnostics data in a server, and those kinds of things. Next up, Chris May says, hi, Brent. Inside an actual execution plan, it has both the estimated and actual mode, like row versus batch. Can these ever be different to each other? Okay, I have never seen it, but I've never looked that closely. My guess, and this is just purely a guess, is that they could be situations where SQL Server desires batch mode but can't get it due to extreme memory pressure, because batch mode generally requires a whole lot more memory than row mode does. I've never had that be something that was a problem for me. I just want to give you the theoretical place of where I would go start since you asked the question. But it's not something that keeps me up at night, and I've never had to deal with it in my career. Next up, a fan asks how to use local temp tables. Well, you create them and you query them and you drop them, I guess. He says, particularly in an application using connection pooling. Okay, so here's the problem. When you say connection pooling, generally that's things like a web service or an API that's making thousands of calls per minute or per second. And generally speaking, I don't want to have objects stick around for an extended period of time under those circumstances. Because what I think you're really asking is, I have a process on the app side that's going to create a temp table, do some work, do some thinking over in C#, in Java, whatever, come back to the SQL Server later and expect that temp table to be there. You know what temp is short for? I'll give you a second to figure that one out. Temp is short for permanent. Oh, no, I got that backwards. No, temp is short for temporary. These tables are expected to be around temporarily, but when you do things like connection pooling, you're sharing a connection between lots of different processes in your application. You shouldn't. Goonie Jam says they stand for temperamental. I like that too as well. Temperamental tables is actually quite good. But you shouldn't expect the same temporary temperamental tables to be around when it comes time to make another connection call. So what it sounds like you're trying to do is you're trying to coordinate those so that the table will stick around. What you want is a permanent table. Create yourself a permanent working table and then put a column in there for things like user ID or session ID so that your application can repeatedly go back and query that table and make changes to it over and over again over time, since you're not really interested in temp objects. Oh, Deshaun asks a personal one. Any Antarctica cruise plans? Yes. So I actually had an Antarctica cruise, bought and paid for. Jimmy Buffett. Oh, this is an experience of a lifetime. Jimmy Buffett did an Antarctica cruise, I want to say last year. Had everything bought and paid for, had my cabin all assigned, and the closer that it got to the date, the less comfortable I was with how the cruise was handling things like COVID. They expected everybody to fly down to South America to board the cruise ship, quarantine for a couple of days and take COVID tests, and then go get on the ship. And you were only going to be allowed on the ship if you had a negative COVID test. And I'm like, oh, I got a bad feeling about how this is going to go down. Because I love Jimmy Buffett. He's fantastic. Love his music, love the whole lifestyle and all that. Jimmy Buffett concerts and events are not exactly known for cleanliness, sobriety, solitude, and chastity. Is that a gentle enough way of saying that? One of my favorite memories from a Jimmy Buffett event was I was walking through the tailgate party before the event, and two little old ladies, one of them grabs me by the back of the neck, and the other little old lady brings a plastic gasoline can to my lips. And on the gasoline can, there was tape with a thing that said parrot pee, except it was an even less socially acceptable word than pee, and poured it into my mouth. Proceeded to just dump liquor of an unestablished origin with other people's lips had been on it and all that, and then laugh, kiss me on the lips, and keep right on going to the next person. And I was like, what on earth is going on here? So as a result of that, I thought, I don't know that an Antarctica cruise with Jimmy Buffett fans is really the right thing for me to do at this exact point in time. I've been on cruises, lots of cruises, and I love cruises, and I've been on Jimmy Buffett concerts, and I love that kind of thing, but it was just like the wrong Venn diagram of overlapping for that exact moment in time, plus trying to pass a negative COVID test. That seemed a little suspicious to me. Next up, Curious DBA, another personal kind of question, says, I'm sure you built a strong nest egg over the years. One of my favorite Twitch memes is, you think I'm rich? I'm just irresponsible. I was like, that's kind of rings true. Aside from generating additional sources of income, what is your investing approach? Have you had any costly mistakes or big wins? I never want to give advice, financial advice or legal advice to other people because I don't feel like an expert on those. So my approach is just generally to, since I'm in a risky industry, like in consulting and building my own business, because there's a lot of risks there, I tend to go less risky outside of that. Outside of that, I tend to go pretty conservative. I would say that investing in cars is a bad idea. Cars are not a great investment. They, for the most part, even when they gain in value over time, your maintenance and insurance ends up overeating most of that. So don't see those as investments. Efraim asks, what database technology should a new startup company use? Whatever database your CTO, Chief Technology Officer, has the most experience with. Whatever one they have the most experience with, they're going to have the easiest time hiring people to use it. They're going to have the easiest time working with the sysadmins to get it up and running. There's a line, and I'm probably going to butcher it. You do innovative things with boring technology, or do boring things with innovative technology, but never try to do innovative things with innovative technology. You're going to be learning too many things all at once. People don't know what they're doing, plus they don't know the platform that they're working with. It's a recipe for long project startup times and failure. So for example, when Richie and I started building SQL Constant Care, now I'm going to say that Richie did all the building. I just did all the sketch out. Hey, here's a really cool idea that I would love to see implemented. I kind of thought of it as a boring thing, but we were going to use really innovative technology. And so that way he could do something that he knew really well how to do, but use new technology in order to do it to keep the costs low, things like serverless and Aurora Postgres, which was fun. Logar The Barbarian asks, presuming the business has no performance concerns. What? That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. Did I read those 7 words correctly? I have never met a business that has no performance concerns. I've never met that. That's interesting, though. Let's talk theory. At what point would you be concerned about running a production application database on Express Edition? Oh, that's totally fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. Express Edition, it's not about performance. I mean, if you can have a poor performing Enterprise Edition for that matter. But what you're probably worried about is the Express Edition is limited to 1 CPU core per query and 1 gigabyte of RAM, if I remember right, which is a pretty heinously low number. The thing that I really worry about is reliability and uptime. Express doesn't have SQL Server Agent built in. So you're going to have to do something in order to get regular backups. And when the thing crashes, you're not going to have any kind of automatic failover somewhere else. Now, over the years, people have built a lot of their own roll your own replacements for SQL Server Agent or for clustering with SQL Server Express. Just keep in mind that you're doing things that are way less documented, way less supported, so you're going to run into more problems when they break. The thing that I would encourage you to do instead of Express Edition is Azure SQL DB, because there are dirt cheap options for Azure SQL DB that include the backups and include some high availability when things go bump in the night. You can have the same performance concerns with really crappy versions of Azure SQL DB, but at least that way you have some high availability and guaranteed backups. Bobby says, isn't that why they're calling you, though? Because they have performance problems? That's why I've never heard of a business without performance issues. To some extent, that's true. That's what I do now. Like the last 10 years is all performance type stuff. But before that, I was a database administrator, normal day-to-day reliability. Man, you ask any user if they're happy with database performance. I don't know a lot of happy users. I know a lot of unhappy users. Vishnu asks, is a clustered index on a temp table ever a wise idea? Sure. How do you make this determination? If I have a process that needs to repeatedly join to some other table, then it'll help me out if I have a clustered index on that table in order to facilitate the joins. However, the key term there is repeatedly. We're talking like 3, 4, 5 times in a row inside the same stored procedure, joined to the same tables. Most of the time when I see that, when someone's doing that, my first pushback is, yo dog, why are you doing the same work over and over and over again? And we tune that part. But if they can't tune that part, that's where the clustered index on the table makes sense, on the temp table makes sense. Let's see here. Next up, Divya asks, how do you determine how many pages are being used for a single row in a table? First off, if you ever find yourself asking that question, you want to question everything you've ever done that led you up to that point. Like every decision you made leading up to this moment in your life was a terrible decision. You don't want to micromanage pages. What you want to do is store the data that you need to store. Don't store more than that. Don't store less than that. Sit down with a pen and paper, or your favorite way of taking notes, a chisel and a stone tablet, whatever. Sit down with a pen and paper and say, what is it exactly that we need to store in this table? Store nothing more than that and nothing less than that. The end. Now, are there ever cases where you do need to know how many rows are fitting per page? Yes, if I hit to performance concerns where I'm trying to minimize the amount of reads that I do, but the solution to that isn't to change the design of the table. The solution to that is indexes. Indexes are like reporting copies of a table that let you choose less columns on there if you want to store less data. If you want to learn more about storing as little as possible and no more than that, check out Lewis Davidson's book on relational database design. It is, as they say, not thin, kind of like me, but that will get you more on how to design your tables. Bonus points to SleepyDBA for pointing out in chat EFCOD and third normal form, thick, as SQL Dev would say, SleepyDBA would say. SleepyDBA says, "Hi Brent, thank you for your excellent community support." You are welcome. It says, "How can we monitor the insert operations progress on a temp table? Is there a DMB in SQL Server 2022 that supports this?" So I'm going to give you an out-of-the-box way that's really easy. SP who is active. SP who is active has a call. It's a totally open source stored procedure from Adam Mechanic, a guy out of the Boston area. And it shows you, as you might guess from the name, which queries are active. And so when you run that for queries that are running right now, there's a column in the output called tempDB allocations. And that'll tell you, if I remember right, it's based in pages, but you can hit the documentation for it. SP who is active will tell you, or tempDB allocations tells you the number of 8K pages, I believe, that are allocated in tempDB for that query, which will get you a rough idea of how it's moving along. Another way that you could do it, which is way less guaranteed to be reliable, is in newer versions of SQL Server, like 2016 Service Pack 1 and forward. There's something called query profiles that will give you the current live execution plans for a query. They had some overheads, so they weren't on by default in 2016 and 2017. They're on by default in 2019 and 2022. If you use SP who is active or SP Blitz who, they will show you the query's live execution plan and show you how many rows have been inserted or have moved through an execution plan live. That, I think, is the single buggiest feature in SQL Server right now. So it works, but I just got to have that disclaimer that it's not very reliable. The way that I would start with is SP who is active's tempDB allocations. DK Kimbo says over in chat, "I love me some SP who is active." That you'll find lots of raving reviews about that particular product. GuaroSQL, please stop asking the question. We've already covered it. You were late. There's the door. Next up, oops, no, shoot, hold on a second here. Let me go switch that around because I'm not going to show that one. There we go. BobbyCC, last one we'll do today, says BobbyCC says, "My friend's TVF, table valued function, uses less resources joining to a view, filtering the same third with the legwork. How do I determine which is better? Compare their execution plans. And I teach you how to do that in my Fundamentals of Query Tuning class. Go to brentozar.com. Click Training up at the top. Fundamentals of Query Tuning. Today is literally the last day that I am running a sale on my training classes for this company's 21st anniversary. So right now you can get 21% off. Those of you poor souls who are watching the recording, it is already too late because by the time this recording goes up, those classes will be off sale. All right, well, that's it for today's office hours. I am now going to go into the backyard. I can hear that the concrete has stopped flowing through the concrete truck like it was making a whole racket out here earlier. So I'm really curious to see what kind of progress they made. You can check out my Instagram and my TikTok. I'll post a video over there and show you what the progress is. And I will see y'all tomorrow on the next office hours. Adios.